Alright, buckle up folks, because we're about to dive into one of the most absurd, jaw-dropping, and downright hilarious underdog stories in football history. And no, I'm not talking about some random kid who made it big. I'm talking about a man who redefined what it means to be old and absolutely unstoppable. A guy who was so ancient, people joked his first clean sheet was against the Roman Empire. Meet Dino Zoff, the Italian wall who didn't just break records, he shattered them with the subtlety of a sledgehammer to a stained glass window. Now, let's set the scene. Imagine being a professional footballer at the ripe old age of 40. That's right, 40. Most players at that age are either coaching Sunday League teams, complaining about their knees, or starring in Viagra commercials. But not Dino. Oh no, this man was out here embarrassing strikers half his age like it was his part-time hobby. And the craziest part? He wasn't just playing at 40, he was dominating. Winning World Cups, lifting trophies, and making goalkeeping look so easy, you'd think he had cheat codes. But here's the kicker. Zoff wasn't some overnight sensation. His career was a slow burn, a masterclass in patience, resilience, and sheer stubbornness. He didn't even become Italy's first-choice keeper until he was 32. Let that sink in. Most players are retired by then, but Zoff, he was just getting started, and once he got that starting spot, he held onto it like a pit bull with a stake, refusing to let go until he was damn well ready. So how did this guy do it? How did a man who looked like he should have been collecting pension checks instead of saving penalties become one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time? Well, that's exactly what we're here to unpack. Because Zoff's story isn't just about talent, it's about defying logic, laughing in the face of time, and proving that age really is just a number. Now before we dive deep into the madness, let's get one thing straight. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Seriously, hit that button right now, because this story is so wild, so unbelievable, that you're going to want every single second of it. And trust me, by the time we're done, you'll be telling your grandkids about the time you learned how a 40-year-old man became an immortal legend. So let's rewind the clock and start at the beginning. Back when Zoff was just a fresh-faced kid with a dream, and absolutely no idea he'd one day become football's ultimate Benjamin Button. You ever hear those stories about legendary athletes who were basically born with a ball at their feet? Yeah, Dino Zoff was not one of those kids. This man's origin story makes Rocky Balboa look like a spoiled trust fund baby. Born in 1942 in a tiny Italian village called Mariano del Friuli, which sounds more like a pasta dish than a place. Young Dino grew up in post-war Italy, where the only thing scarcer than opportunities was decent football equipment. Picture this. A scrawny kid playing goalkeeper in dirt fields, using rocks as goalposts, with gloves so thin they might as well have been tissue paper. Meanwhile, today's keepers are out here crying if their $300 gloves get a little muddy. Zoff, he was catching cannonballs with his bare hands and saying grazie for the privilege. Now here's where it gets funny. Zoff didn't even start as a goalkeeper. He began as a midfielder, because in small-town Italy, you played wherever there was space. But fate intervened, when one day his team's keeper didn't show up. Little did anyone know that this random substitution would accidentally create one of the greatest goalkeepers in history. It's like if Michael Jordan had been put in as goalie during a soccer game and suddenly became the next Lev Yashin. His first semi-pro team was Udinese, where he made his debut at 19. And let me tell you, it was not the fairy tale start you're imagining. The team was so bad they made the Washington Generals look like champions. They got relegated immediately, and Zoff got loaned out like a library book. But here's the twist. This failure was actually the best thing that could have happened to him. Because then came Mantova, a small club where Zoff actually got to play. And play he did. For 4 seasons, he honed his skills in Serie B, developing that legendary positioning and anticipation that would later make him untouchable. Imagine being a striker in 1960s Italy, thinking you're about to score on some nobody from a small-town club, only for this unassuming guy to casually save everything you throw at him. Must have been absolutely infuriating. The real kicker? While all this was happening, the Italian national team coaches were sleeping harder than a narcoleptic sloth. They completely ignored Zoff for years. Meanwhile, he's out here putting on goalkeeping clinics every weekend, and the so-called experts are like, nah, we're good with our current guys. It's like having Michelangelo painting your house and you're like, yeah, but can he do walls? But don't worry, the universe eventually corrected this cosmic injustice, because in 1967, Napoli finally woke up and said, hey, maybe we should sign that guy who's been embarrassing everyone in Serie B. And thus began Zoff's real ascent to greatness. But that is a story for next time. Alright, so we left off with Zoff finally getting his big break at Napoli in 1967. Now you'd think a move to a Serie A club would mean instant fame, glory, and maybe even a fan club or two. But no, this is Dino Zoff we're talking about, the human embodiment of the phrase, slow and steady wins the race. When Zoff arrived in Naples, the local fans were like, who's this guy? Did we accidentally sign someone's uncle? Because let's be real, Zoff wasn't exactly the flashy highlight reel keeper that gets crowds screaming. No, he was the kind of goalkeeper who made the spectacular look boring. While other keepers were out there doing backflips and dramatic dives, Zoff was just there. Always. Like a stubborn stain you can't scrub off. And that's exactly what made him terrifying. Strikers would take a shot, already celebrating in their heads, only to look up and see Zoff casually holding the ball like he'd been expecting it the whole time. It was like trying to sneak a cookie past an Italian grandmother. Impossible, and you just end up feeling stupid for even trying. But here's the hilarious part. Even though Zoff was clearly elite, the Italian national team still didn't call him up. Like they were out here picking random guys off the street while Zoff was putting up clean sheets like it was his job. Which, to be fair, it was. It got to the point where you had to wonder if the national team coach had some kind of personal vendetta against him. Oh, another shutout Dino? Cute. Anyway, here's another cap for the guy who concedes 3 goals a game. Finally, in 1968, after what felt like a lifetime of being ignored, Italy's manager woke up from his nap and gave Zoff his first international cap at the ripe old age of 26. For context, most elite keepers today are already established stars by 22. But Zoff? Nah, he was just getting warmed up. And then, just when it seemed like things were looking up, Napoli sold him. Yes, you heard that right. The club that had finally given him a platform decided, you know what? Let's cash in on this guy while we can. So off he went to Juventus in 1972, where his career would go from really good to, are you sure this man isn't a robot? But that's a story for next time. For now, let's just appreciate the absurdity of a world-class keeper being ignored, undervalued, and then suddenly becoming irreplaceable. Classic Zoff. Okay, so picture this. It's 1972, Juventus signs this 30-year-old goalkeeper from Napoli, and half their fans are like, wait, we're buying a guy who's basically a senior citizen in football years? Are we suddenly a retirement home? Little did they know, they just signed a man who would redefine the word consistency. A keeper so reliable, he made Swiss watches look flaky. When Zoff arrived in Turin, Juventus wasn't yet the all-conquering monster they are today. They were good, sure, but not great. And then Zoff showed up and basically said, alright, let's fix this. Within his first season, he did something insane. He went 903 minutes without conceding a goal. That's over 10 full matches where strikers kicked the ball toward him and then just watched it disappear into the void. Opponents started wondering if he'd bribed the net to reject their shots. And here's the best part. Zoff wasn't some acrobatic, flying everywhere kind of keeper. No, he was the guy who would stand there, look at the ball like it had insulted his mother, and then calmly catch it. No drama, no unnecessary dives. Just pure, unfiltered nope. Meanwhile, the Italian national team, after years of pretending Zoff didn't exist, suddenly realized, oh crap, this guy might actually be good. So they made him their starting keeper for the 1974 World Cup. Now, you'd think this would be his big moment, right? Wrong. Italy had a disastrous tournament, crashing out in the group stage, and of course, people blamed Zoff. Because apparently, when your entire team plays like they've never met before, it's the goalkeeper's fault. But Zoff? He didn't care. He just went back to Juventus and kept doing what he did best, winning. Over the next few years, Zoff became the backbone of a Juventus team that dominated Italy. 5 Serie A titles, 1 Coppa Italia, 1 UEFA Cup, and the craziest part? He was doing all this in his late 30s. Most players are slowing down by then, but Zoff, he was just getting warmed up. By 1978, Zoff was 36 years old and still Italy's undisputed number 1. At the World Cup that year, Italy played out of their minds, finishing 4th, their best performance in decades. And guess who was the rock at the back? That's right, but Zoff wasn't satisfied, because he knew the biggest prize was still coming. The 1982 World Cup? Just imagine being a striker in 1980, lining up against Italy, seeing this 38-year-old man in goal and thinking, finally an easy game, only for Zoff to save everything you throw at him like he's been reading your mind. But we'll get to 1982, because that's when Zoff went from legend to eternal god of goalkeeping. First, some context. Zoff was 40 years old at this tournament. 40. Most players at that age are either managing Sunday league teams or starring in arthritis medication commercials. But Zoff? He wasn't just playing. He was Italy's captain and starting goalkeeper. The media had a field day with this. Isn't he too old? Shouldn't he be in a rocking chair? Meanwhile, Zoff just shrugged and said, age is a number. Shutouts are forever. Italy's start was not great. They barely scraped through the group stage with 3 draws. People were screaming for Zoff to be benched, claiming he was past it. But here's the thing about Zoff. He thrived on doubt. The louder the critics got, the harder he locked in. Then came the knockout stages, and suddenly Italy, and Zoff woke up. Versus Argentina, 2-1 win. Zoff made saves so clutch, Maradona started questioning reality. Versus Brazil, 3-2 win, the game of the tournament. This was the match that cemented Zoff's legacy. Brazil had the most terrifying attack in the world. Zico, Socrates, Falcao, and they threw everything at Italy. But Zoff? Cool, calm, unbreakable. He didn't just save shots, he killed Brazilian dreams. Versus Poland, 2-0 win, another clean sheet, because why not? Then came the final against West Germany. The stakes? A World Cup trophy for Italy and immortality for Zoff. And what did he do? Only went out and kept a clean sheet in a 3-1 win. At 40th, against one of the best teams in the world. When the final whistle blew, Zoff didn't even celebrate like a normal person. He just nodded like, yep, and knew I'd do it. Oldest player to win the World Cup, 40 years, 133 days, a record that still stands. Captain, leader, legend, the first goalkeeper to ever lift the trophy as captain. 0 Fs given. And retired at 41 like a boss, leaving everyone wondering if he was actually a vampire. By now, you're probably thinking, how does a man play at the highest level until he's 40 and then just walk away? Well, that's exactly what Zoff did after the 1983 season, retiring at 41 like he had somewhere more important to be. No farewell tour, no dramatic last match, just a quiet exit from the pitch he dominated for 2 decades. But here's the kicker, even in retirement, Zoff's influence only grew stronger. Modern goalkeepers still study his positioning like it's sacred text. Buffon, arguably the greatest Italian keeper since Zoff, basically built his entire career on Zoff's blueprint. The man revolutionized goalkeeping by proving you don't need flashy dives or acrobatics, just perfect anticipation and the mental toughness of a diamond. His record of 1,142 minutes without conceding in Serie A stood for over 30 years until some upstart named Buffon came along. The funniest part? After retiring, Zoff became a manager and was just as stubborn as he was as a player. He led Juventus to UEFA Cup glory in 1990 and even took Italy to the Euro 2000 final, proving he could frustrate opponents from the sidelines too. His coaching style mirrored his playing days. No nonsense. All results. Players either loved him or were terrified of him, with no in-between. Even today, at 82 years old, Zoff still occasionally pops up at matches looking like he could probably still save a penalty or two. The man is essentially football's version of a fine Italian wine. He just gets better with age. And that's the magic of Dino Zoff. He wasn't the most athletic, he wasn't the flashiest, but he had a mind for the game that bordered on supernatural. So the next time you see a goalkeeper making impossible saves look easy, remember, they're probably just trying, and failing, to be half as good as Zoff was. The man didn't just play football, he outsmarted it. And that's why, decades after his retirement, strikers still wake up in cold sweats remembering those cold, calculating eyes staring them down from the goal line. The true measure of Zoff's greatness isn't found in trophies or clean sheets, though he's got plenty, but in how he completely rewrote the rules of goalkeeping. Before Zoff, keepers were expected to be shot-stopping acrobats. After Zoff, they had to be chess masters in gloves. His secret weapon wasn't reflexes, it was his brain. He played 3 moves ahead of every striker, anticipating shots before the attackers even knew where they were going to place them. This is why modern analytics nerds lose their minds studying Zoff's game footage. The man had a 90% success rate on coming off his line because he could read plays like they were children's books. Today's goalkeeping coaches still show clips of Zoff's positioning as masterclasses in efficiency. That famous Buffon stance, the one where he looks bored before making an impossible save, that's pure Zoff imitation. The man invented the art of making difficult saves look routine through perfect positioning. What's most hilarious is how Zoff's style broke strikers psychologically. Opponents would take one look at him standing there, calm, unmoving, eyes locked on the ball, and suddenly second-guess their entire shooting strategy. It's like trying to bluff a poker player who can see your cards. Zoff didn't just save shots, he destroyed confidence. There are interviews with 1970s strikers who still sound traumatized, talking about facing him. "You'd think you had an open net," one said. Then suddenly his hand would appear like magic. The ultimate proof of his genius? How terrible his stats make modern keepers look. In an era when gloves were basically gardening mittens and pitches were mud pits, Zoff maintained clean sheet percentages that would make today's elite keepers blush. His record of 903 consecutive minutes without conceding in the 1970s would be impressive today with modern training and equipment. Back then it was practically supernatural. Perhaps the greatest tribute to Zoff is how every generation since has tried and failed to replicate his quiet dominance. Modern keepers have all the technology, sports science, and specialized coaching Zoff never did, yet none have matched his combination of longevity and consistency. The man was winning Serie A titles at 38, when most players today are retired by 35. He wasn't just ahead of his time, he exists outside of time altogether in goalkeeping role. What truly separated Zoff from every other goalkeeper wasn't just his skills. It was his ice-cold mentality that turned pressure into his playground. While other keepers cracked under the weight of big moments, Zoff thrived on them like they were his morning espresso. This was a man who treated high-stakes World Cup matches with the same calm intensity as a Sunday kickabout in the park. The 1982 World Cup semi-final against Brazil perfectly showcased this unshakable mindset. While the entire football world was hyperventilating about facing Brazil's magic quartet of Zico, Socrates, Falcao, and Ader, Zoff walked onto the pitch looking like he'd just woken up from a nap. His teammates later admitted they took one look at their 40-year-old captain's relaxed demeanor and immediately thought, okay, if he's not worried, why should we be? That's leadership that stats can't measure. Opposing coaches would try every psychological trick to rattle him. Having strikers trash talk him, crowds jeer him, even bizarre mind games about his age. Nothing worked. Zoff had the focus of a Buddhist monk and the competitive fire of a gladiator. There's a famous story from his Juventus days where an opposing striker tried to intimidate him before a penalty by saying, "I know exactly where I'm putting this." Zoff just stared back blankly and said, "Good. Then I won't have to guess." He saved it, of course. This mental fortress wasn't natural. Zoff built it through obsessive preparation. While other players partied, he studied opponents' shooting patterns like a professor analyzing data. He knew certain strikers would change their body language when going for specific corners. He recognized which players would hesitate if he held his ground a split second longer. This wasn't just goalkeeping. It was psychological warfare conducted with gloves and a jersey. The craziest part? The bigger the stage, the better he performed. Champions League nights, World Cup finals, title deciders. These were Zoff's favorite playgrounds. While lesser keepers would get caught up in the moment, Zoff simplified everything to its essence. See ball, a stop ball. No drama, no panic, just pure calculated execution. Modern sports psychologists would kill a bottle and sell whatever mental framework Zoff operated under. This explains why he was still elite at 40 when most athletes' minds and bodies have long since quit. Zoff's true secret weapon wasn't his hands or his reflexes. It was a mindset so bulletproof that time couldn't touch it. In an era before sports psychology was mainstream, he was quietly pioneering mental performance techniques that today's athletes pay millions to learn. The man wasn't just saving shots, he was writing the blueprint for competitive greatness that transcends sport itself. Zoff's legacy extends far beyond the penalty area. He fundamentally changed how we think about athletic longevity and the psychology of peak performance. Sports scientists still marvel at how a man playing in the 1970s to 80s, without modern nutrition or recovery technology, maintained world-class reflexes and decision-making into his 40s. His career stands as a living rebuke to every athlete who claims they're past their prime at 30. The secret wasn't some magical Italian diet or secret training regimen, though his wine and pasta approach would give today's nutritionists heart attacks. It was his ruthless efficiency. Zoff mastered the art of doing less to achieve more, conserving energy through perfect positioning so he didn't need to make spectacular dives. While other keepers wore themselves out chasing shots, Zoff was already standing where the ball would arrive. This wasn't laziness, it was genius-level economy of movement. His training methods were decades ahead of their time. While teammates were smoking cigarettes at halftime, true story, Zoff pioneered visualization techniques that modern sports psychologists would recognize. He'd mentally rehearse matches the night before, anticipating every possible scenario. This explains those eerie moments when he'd make a save before the shot was even taken. He'd already seen the play unfold in his mind. Perhaps most remarkably, Zoff's brain showed no signs of slowing down, even as his body aged. Researchers now believe his ability to anticipate plays wasn't just experience, it represented a unique neural adaptation to the game. MRI scans of today's elite keepers show similar brain activity patterns when reading plays, proving Zoff was literally ahead of his time neurologically. The ultimate proof of his revolutionary approach? How terrible he makes modern athletes look when they complain about wear and tear. Zoff played through injuries that would have today's stars tweeting from hospital beds. No cryotherapy chambers, no hyperbaric oxygen tents, just old-school toughness and a refusal to let pain dictate his limits. When asked how he handled the physical toll, he once shrugged, "You either play or you don't." This explains why his influence now appears in unexpected places. NBA coaches study his positioning for defensive schemes. Esports teams analyze his mental preparation techniques. Even outside sports, his focus on efficiency over effort inspires everyone, from CEOs to chess grandmasters. Zoff proved that true mastery isn't about physical gifts. It's about crafting an unshakable system that works when talent alone isn't enough. Zoff's impact on modern football becomes even more astonishing when you realize how many of his unorthodox methods are now standard practice. That calm, almost bored demeanor he perfected in goal. Today's sports psychologists call it optimal arousal state and teach it to athletes across every discipline. His habit of studying opponents' tendencies for hours? Now, every top club has a team of analysts breaking down footage, just trying to approximate what Zoff did with pen, paper, and sheer football IQ. The irony is delicious. Coaches today spend millions on technology trying to recreate advantages Zoff achieved through pure intellect and observation. Where modern keepers rely on tablets showing shot charts during matches, Zoff carried all that data in his head. When today's stars use wearable tech to monitor fatigue, Zoff simply listened to his body with a mindfulness that would make a yoga instructor jealous. His entire career stands as proof that sometimes the most advanced technology is between a player's ears. What's most remarkable is how Zoff's approach has trickled down to youth development. The old-school emphasis on athleticism and reflexes is giving way to teaching kids how to read the game, exactly what made Zoff special. Modern academies now prioritize decision-making drills that look suspiciously like exercises Zoff invented in the 1970s. That signature crouching stance he used, once mocked as old man goalkeeping, is now taught as the optimal ready position. The student has become the teacher, decades after the lesson began. Even his longevity secrets are being rediscovered. Sports scientists now confirm what Zoff demonstrated, that conserving energy through efficiency leads to longer careers. The same medical experts who once scoffed at players competing past 35 now study Zoff's career as a blueprint. His less is more philosophy anticipated modern load management by 40 years. The man was essentially football's Nostradamus, predicting the future of the position while everyone else was stuck in the past. The ultimate testament to his vision? Watch any top goalkeeper today, from Neuer to Alisson, and you'll see flashes of Zoff's genius. The way they cut down angles, the calm under pressure, the anticipation that seems psychic. They're all playing a version of the game Zoff perfected in relative obscurity. The old master may have retired his gloves, but his fingerprints are all over modern goalkeeping. Not bad for a guy whose training regimen included espresso and intuition. The most fascinating aspect of Zoff's legacy isn't what he changed in football. It's how his philosophy has infiltrated completely unrelated fields. High-frequency stock traders study his anticipation techniques to predict market movements. Surgeons analyze his calm under pressure as a model for operating room focus. Even military strategists have adapted his positioning principles for urban combat scenarios. When the U.S. Navy SEALs developed their quiet, professional ethos, they might as well have been describing Zoff's approach to goalkeeping. This cross-pollination of ideas reveals the deeper truth about Zoff's genius. He wasn't just playing football. He was demonstrating universal principles of human performance. His ability to remain motionless until the critical moment mirrors the OODA, loop theory fighter pilots use: observe, orient, decide, act. The way he conserved energy through efficiency aligns perfectly with Japanese Kaizen principles. Even his famous glare has become a case study in nonverbal dominance for FBI hostage negotiators. The business world has been particularly voracious in mining Zoff's methods. Silicon Valley CEOs pay thousands to learn Zoff-style decision-making, that perfect balance of patience and explosive action. His career is now taught at Harvard Business School as a masterclass in sustained excellence. The term Zoff time has entered management lexicon to describe that critical moment when preparation meets opportunity. Perhaps most surprisingly, Zoff's influence thrives in esports, where reaction times are measured in milliseconds. Professional gamers have adopted his pre-match visualization techniques verbatim. His habit of studying opponents' tells is now standard practice in competitive gaming. When a StarCraft champion was asked about his comeback strategy, he shrugged, "I just pulled a Zoff," waited for them to make the first mistake. What makes this cross-disciplinary adoption so remarkable is that Zoff himself never set out to be a philosopher. He was just a goalkeeper trying to stop balls in the most efficient way possible. Yet the purity of his approach created a blueprint that transcends sport. In an age of overcomplicated systems and data overload, Zoff's legacy reminds us that sometimes the most powerful solutions are the simplest ones, if you have the discipline to execute them perfectly. Let's get one thing straight. If Dino Zoff played today, sports scientists would probably short-circuit trying to analyze him, because the wildest part of his legacy isn't just what he achieved, it's that modern technology keeps proving he was right about everything. Take his famous positioning. Critics used to say he stood still too much. Fast forward to 2024, and every goalkeeping analytics model preaches the exact same thing: efficiency over exertion. GPS data shows elite keepers now cover less ground than ever because, like Zoff, they've learned that being in the right place beats diving spectacularly. Those lazy stands where he barely moved? Turns out they were masterclasses in energy conservation that extended his career by a decade. Then there's the brain science. Neuroimaging studies on modern keepers reveal something eerie. The best ones show Zoff-like activity in their prefrontal cortex, the area tied to anticipation and decision-making. Researchers call it quiet brain performance, where the mind filters out noise to focus only on critical cues. Zoff didn't need an MRI to know this. He just called it watching the hips, not the feet. Even his unorthodox training methods get vindicated daily. That habit of studying opponents' penalty tendencies for hours? Manchester City's staff now use AI to do the same thing, except Zoff did it with a notepad and sheer obsession. His visualization routines, now rebranded as neuropriming and sold to athletes for $500 per hour. The man was essentially a sports lab operating in the analog age. The funniest part? Biomechanics experts recently recreated his famous saves using motion capture and force plates. The results? His technique was too efficient by modern standards. While today's keepers waste energy with exaggerated dives, Zoff's compact movements delivered more power with less effort. The lead scientist on the study reportedly muttered, "This shouldn't be possible," before ordering another espresso in tribute. And let's talk reflexes. Tests using high-speed cameras show Zoff's reaction time at 40 was faster than most 25-year-old keepers today. How? Because he didn't react, he predicted. Modern stats show 80% of saves are decided before the shot, which explains why Zoff seemed to teleport to the ball. He wasn't psychic, he just hacked the game's code before computers existed. The ultimate irony? Today's goalkeepers spend millions on cryotherapy, hyperbaric chambers, and personal neuroscientists to chase what Zoff achieved with a stretch routine he probably invented while boiling pasta. His career is a middle finger to the idea that technology creates greatness. Sometimes, greatness creates the technology to explain it. After hanging up his gloves at 41, Zoff did what all retired legends do. He immediately started annoying the hell out of people by proving that he was right about everything. As a coach, he brought the same unshakable confidence and borderline obsessive preparation that made him a goalkeeping god, except now he had a whistle and the power to bench people. His managerial style? Imagine your strictest high school teacher, but with the cold, calculating stare of a man who once stared down Maradona without blinking. Players either loved him or wanted to throw him into the nearest canal. There was no in between. At Juventus, where he won the UEFA Cup in 1990, veterans initially scoffed at his old-school methods, until they realized his game plans worked with terrifying precision. Zoff didn't believe in motivational speeches. He believed in winning, preferably while doing as little unnecessary running as possible. Then came the Italy job in 1998, where he took a squad of egos and molded them into Euro 2000 finalists. His secret? Treating professional footballers like they were still kids who needed to learn fundamentals. While other coaches obsessed over fancy tactics, Zoff drilled his teams on positioning. Shocking, right? Until they could execute it in their sleep. His Italy side didn't overpower teams with flair. They out-anticipated them just like Zoff did in his playing days. Of course, not everyone appreciated his methods. Some players grumbled about his brutal honesty. Zoff was allergic to sugarcoating. Others hated how he'd point out their mistakes with the same calm detachment he once used to save penalties, but the results spoke for themselves. When Italy crushed the Netherlands in the Euro 2000 semi-final, it wasn't because they were more talented, it was because Zoff had them prepared for every possible scenario. The funniest part? His stubbornness never faded. Even in his 70s, when asked about modern football's obsession with data and gadgets, Zoff just shrugged and said, "If you watch enough football, the game tells you everything." Which of course infuriated the analytics nerds, because deep down, they knew he was right. He'd been doing their job without spreadsheets for decades. Let's address the elephant in the room. Modern goalkeepers have better gloves, better training, and more data than ever before. So why does none of them hold a candle to Zoff's legacy? The answer is equal parts hilarious and humiliating for today's shot stoppers. First, let's talk longevity. The average elite keeper today retires by 35. Zoff won a World Cup at 40. Not just played, won, as captain. While today's keepers are getting subbed off for muscle cramps, Zoff was out there playing every minute like his bones were made of titanium. And he did it without cryotherapy chambers, personalized nutritionists, or whatever witchcraft modern clubs use to keep players fresh. His secret? Not wasting energy on unnecessary dives, something today's analytics departments are only now realizing is genius. Then there's the clean sheet records. Zoff's 903-minute streak without conceding in the 1970s remains one of those stats that looks fake. Modern keepers with their hyper-specific training regimens and video analysis can't even sniff that number. Why? Because Zoff didn't just stop shots, he prevented them before they happened. Today's keepers rely on reaction saves. Zoff relied on making strikers second-guess themselves into oblivion. And let's not forget the psychological edge. Modern keepers have entire social media teams crafting their intimidating personas. Zoff, he just stood there, staring through attackers' souls like a disappointed grandfather, and it worked better than any PR campaign ever could. There's a reason strikers in the 70s and 80s looked physically pained when they saw him in goal. He didn't just beat you, he made you feel stupid for trying. The most damning evidence? The numbers don't lie. Adjusted for era, Zoff's save percentages, clean sheet rates, and big game performances eclipse nearly every modern keeper. The ones who come close, Buffon, Neuer, are the ones who studied him religiously. Even with all their advancements, today's keepers are still chasing a standard set by a man who trained with pasta dinners and gut instinct. So the next time you see a modern keeper making a flashy save, ask yourself, could they do it at 40? With leather gloves? On a mud pit of a pitch? While smoking half the team's cigarettes at halftime? Exactly. Some athletes transcend their sport. Michael Jordan became a global brand. Muhammad Ali became a social movement. Zoff? He became something far more bizarre, an accidental cultural icon who infiltrated everything from art house cinema to internet memes, all while barely trying. The first clue that Zoff had jumped the football fence came in the 1980s, when Italian filmmakers started using his face as a shorthand for unshakable calm. There's a cult scene in an obscure Fellini-inspired film where a panicking businessman hallucinates Zoff's face on a speeding train and suddenly finds peace. Art critics called it surreal. Football fans called it Tuesday. Because that's exactly what facing Zoff felt like. A man so unnervingly composed, he could stabilize reality just by existing in it. Then came the ads. While other retired players hawked sports drinks or sneakers, Zoff inexplicably became the face of Italian espresso machines, banking services, and, we swear this is real, a line of luxury alarm clocks. The tagline? Precision, you can trust. The man who never conceded an easy goal suddenly wouldn't let you oversleep. The commercials were so unintentionally hilarious they spawned a wave of parody memes. Zoff's face photoshopped onto ancient Roman statues. Zoff as a Jedi Knight. Zoff as the literal. Wall in Game of Thrones. The internet had decided this man wasn't human. He was a metaphysical concept. Even high art couldn't resist. A controversial 2003 Venice Biennale installation featured a looped video of Zoff's 1982 World Cup saves projected onto a giant block of Parmesan cheese. The artist's statement claimed it represented the aging process and impermeability of tradition. Visitors just stood there eating overpriced gelato, nodding like they understood. The pinnacle came when a Japanese anime series secretly based its most powerful guardian spirit on Zoff, a stoic elder who defends a magical gate with impossible reflexes. Fans still debate whether the creators knew they were ripping off a 70s Italian goalkeeper. The answer? Of course they did. Zoff's influence had gone intercontinental without him ever leaving his hometown. What makes this cultural takeover so funny is that Zoff himself seemed utterly bewildered by it. When asked about the Parmesan art piece, he reportedly shrugged and said, "At least it wasn't Swiss cheese." The man who could read strikers' minds couldn't comprehend why anyone would project him onto dairy products, and that, perhaps, is why it worked. Zoff became a blank canvas the world could project its obsessions onto, precisely because he never tried to be anything but himself. Let's be brutally honest, football will never see another Dino Zoff. Not because the talent isn't out there, but because the world that created him no longer exists. The man was a perfect storm of circumstances, mentality, and outright stubbornness that modern football system is designed to prevent. Think about it. Today's youth academies would have cut Zoff at 16 for lack of athletic upside. His career starting position switch, midfielder to keeper, would give modern analytics departments heart attacks. His training regimen, more intuition than data, would get today's sports scientists fired. Even his legendary calm under pressure would be medicated out of him. One look at his stress-resistant brain scans and some team psychologists would try to fix what wasn't broken. The numbers don't lie. Since Zoff retired, 0 goalkeepers have won a World Cup as captain. 0 have kept a 900-plus minute clean sheet, and top-flight football 0 have been elite at 40 without performance-enhancing tech. And here's the kicker, nobody's even close. Today's keepers are products of a system that values measurable traits. Height, wingspan, vertical leap, over the unteachable qualities Zoff had in spades. Anticipation, decision-making, and that eerie ability to be exactly where the ball was headed before it left the striker's foot. But the real death knell for another Zoff? The attention economy. Modern players are too busy building personal brands to master the art of doing nothing perfectly. Zoff's greatest strength was his boredom, the willingness to stand idle for 89 minutes if it meant being ready for the one shot that mattered. Try telling that to today's Instagram generation keepers who panic if they go 10 minutes without a highlight reel save. So when nostalgic fans ask, will we ever see another Zoff? The answer is simple, we're not allowed to. Football has optimized the individuality out of the position. Goalkeeping is now about checklists, not instincts, data points, not genius. And that's why Zoff's legacy grows more impressive with time. He was the last keeper to succeed not because of the system, but in spite of it. The ultimate irony? The more football progresses, the more impossible his career becomes. 50 years from now, historians will look back at his stats like we look at pyramids, wondering how something so monumental was built with such primitive tools.